Why am I still talking about the transition from Capricorn to Aquarius? Well, because we're still in it. Pluto is not done with Capricorn, as you may well know. It will retrograde back into Capricorn for the one final time in our lifetime in September, October, and November of this year. And last year did the same, was at the end of Capricorn, then went into Aquarius, then went back into Capricorn, and just recently went back into Aquarius. So we've been dancing on this precipice for the last year, and it will be for 2 years in total. So in my last video, I talked about that, why that particular transition is so important to understand, to get a grip on, to get good at, right? By highlighting astrologically all the whys. So make sure you check the video, I'll link it below. But in this video, I want to bring in human design because it does it so neatly. Human design has this topic covered much more neatly. And it gives there's a different language around it, and I love it. So I'm going to talk about that in this video, which is another layer of understanding what's happening and giving us always some pointers and some tips of how to work with it. So this human design piece is the gate 60, and I have talked about gate 60 in my astrolog a few weeks ago, which if you can look that as well, but that's from my personal experience. But it certainly covers some of it. And so gate 60. Let me just get my notes so I get the facts correctly. Gate 60 in human design covers the, astrologically speaking, the astrological terrain from 26 degrees Capricorn to 2 degrees Aquarius. So you may have some planets, astrologically speaking, that you know of in these degrees, but if you do a human design chart, which you can do by just Googling free Jovian human design chart, and you can, just do it, then you'll find that you may have other planets that don't exist in astrology as such. They're like called unconscious. They're also the same planets as we know them, but they're called unconscious. So they wouldn't be visible in your astrology chart. But human design covers them, and I'm not going to go into that. But my point is you could check out what you have, whether you have that gate defined. And even if you don't, if you have it defined, means you have one of either the planets as you know them, or other planets, the unconscious kind, the human design only does in that particular gate within those degrees, in which case you'd be defined. So this is very familiar. You have been working with this energy all your life, and I'll talk about the energy in a moment. And it's this transitional energy. But even if you don't have it defined, so you don't have any planets in there, conscious or unconscious, you still have it. So, and specifically since 16th of March 2021, we all have been experiencing this, because that is when Pluto entered into that degree of Capricorn and essentially entered into gate 60. And Pluto will be there. So this is what I mean. It covers the end of Capricorn and the early Aquarius. And so Pluto will leave this gate 60 on 31st of January 2025, but it will also kind of dip back in, for our astrology purposes, it's now still in Aquarius and only in Aquarius, but for human design purposes, it's back into gate 60. So it's this going back, which we will be experiencing this year with Capricorn, is still a theme all the way in 2025. Sure, astrologically speaking, it's in the gate, it's in Aquarius, but this is what I mean. We introduced this other way of looking at this, and we're still in this energy. So it's, in one way, this to me is saying, or rather the way I'm presenting it to you, is giving you extra room to work with this, because we'll need it. And it's like an extra grace time. So this second re-entry is still in 2025. So after 31st of January in 2025, we are back into Pluto moves into gate 41, I think it's called. But then it will go back into gate 60 on 20th of August 2025, and it'll stay there till 6th of December 2025, and then it will be done with gate 60. And I think this transition, up until that point, we'll be working with it, and after that point, we will have mastered it. Well, I certainly that's the hope. And if you work with this intentionally, and if you follow some of my guidelines or whatever, wherever you find guidance, then we have the greater chances of doing this, of making the most of this time. That it's preparing us for is essentially the wildest card in our astrology journey, which is Aquarius. Okay, so Gate 60 is, it's called Gate 60 in Human Design, but if you work with Gene Keys, which I highly recommend, which is similar but not the same, in terms of how it looks at the energies of one's chart, but in terms of the actual gates and that, it's the same. The mechanics of two are the same. So Gate 60 is still the same, as in Gene Keys is still the same as Gate 16 is in what I just talked about, this specific and dates and all that. But I'll be talking from the Gene Key point of view because that's much more poetic. I prefer that way of just considering anything with a bit of poetry. Or poetically spoken, right? So anyway, so the shadow aspect of the shadow expression of this gate is limitation. And you can hear clearly and loudly the language of Capricorn there, right? Limitation. And so, but when we say this is the beauty of introducing a different system to kind of give you some more, like flash out some more stuff from astrology, right? So the beauty of this system is that it clearly states it's a shadow. So the limitation is the shadow now. Not in itself, because limitation is limitation. Limitation has no morality in but it's a shadow in the sense of what we do with it, how we relate to it, what's our relationship to limitation. Now that's a shadow. That's why it's called that limitation is the shadow of this, because ultimately it's anthropomorphic. It's coming from the human response to something, in this case, a theme of a particular energetic portal in our design body. And it's actually saying that it's a shadow because we don't relate to limitation well. And that badness is what creates shadow, because we struggle with it. We struggle against something that we shouldn't struggle, because it is. We don't, by struggling against reality. And so, interestingly, the gift expression of this gate or Gene Key 60 is realism. So struggling and essentially rejecting reality is just like, it's the source of suffering, which is what shadow is essentially. So we are suffering when we fight limitation. Now this is, in terms of language, if we are parallel kind of correspondence to astrology, this is more Capricorn piece. But we are moving into Aquarius shortly. So how this is experienced, like obviously depression, sense of listlessness, restriction, and we just feel it's essentially absence of life. Because and that's Saturn, limitation is Saturn, which is death, physical death, literal physical death, a body, a human dies, so that in that sense as well, but also it's a death, the end of something. Limitation says this is the end. You cannot go further. So it's the death of the potential that comes after the limitation, right? Beyond that, it's like that's limitation. You're going, you're coming up against limitation. All this space here is the potential, but that's dead to you because of the limitation. So in that sense, it's a death. Now, death is, I don't know. I don't think there is a human who's really made peace with death. Well, maybe some enlightened individuals like Eckhart Tolle. I like to bring him up occasionally. But yeah, it's the biggest, right? So my point there being is that it's okay. It's understandable. This is like, so you can understand, you can give yourself a break from, don't beat yourself up that you are struggling with this. Because it is a sense of death. But then what we do, we stay in that death. We don't want to, we don't let it does what it does well, which is provides emptiness for something else to gives birth, gets born, or comes into that space of where something was before and died, right? We keep keeping death alive by fighting with it or against it. We are keeping death alive, which essentially leads to more death. We are generating death. So this death as energy, not literal death, but just as energy, right? So which is what's so hard about this particular gate or Gene Key, right? And the irony in this is that we're essentially keeping ourselves in the past. And yet our problem is because we don't have a future, because that limitation is kind of stopping us, this potential that we have imagined. But we are stuck in the past because we are generating more and more death, which means we're thickening this wall, this limitation. We are not really passing into the potential, i.e. future. So therefore we are getting stuck in the past. So that's another theme of this shadow limitation of the gate 60 or Jinki 60. And the other one I want to mention is that this work that we are rejecting and fighting against, this natural limitation that just happens to happen as life is full of them, right? Keeps us stuck in a mental loop, in the story that we are, that it's bad, that we just without the limitation we could have been, but we can't be because of the limitation. So we end up with some story that is essentially a loop that we keep telling ourselves, and we are again stuck. So we are creating the limitation that is a problem. The limitation before we started fighting against it wasn't a problem. It was just something that happened, a reality of it, of our life, right? But it's all the work that we're doing against it, rejecting it, not accepting it, is what's creating such a problem. So far, I've been speaking in the language of Capricorn. All of this is classic Capricorn stuff. So where does Aquarius come into this? According to human design, this gate, or rather Uranus, is exalted in this gate. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. So Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius. And so why is he exalted? And I spoke of that in different terms, in different language, in the last video a little bit. But here I'll obviously bring it up because it's critical and crucial. So why is Uranus exalted in this? So Uranus, that's all about freedom, right? And just all stuff that is not Capricorn, right? Because we're leaving Capricorn, as per my last video. Why is he exalted here? Because we need to think outside of the box. We need to, so we're boxed in by limitations. We need to think, so instead of being stuck in the mental loop, and in the past, therefore, so the mental activity is all inefficient, highly, we need to think, mental activity, outside of the box being the limitation that's boxing us in. So we need to think outside of it. So in order to overcome it. But there is working with it. It's like, how do you solve a problem? How do you solve a puzzle? You have to have the puzzle to solve it. So you're working, you're not going, oh, I don't want this puzzle, right? You have to accept the puzzle. You have to accept the challenge. You have to accept the problem. And then work with it as opposed to against it. So here we have, and this is, I don't know, in fact, but I don't see this as human design talking about the transition between Capricorn and Aquarius, because it doesn't speak in those terms. But it actually, that gate gives you a beautiful formula for working with all that is problematic and a cause of depression and lifelessness and sense of listlessness. What's the point? I'm facing this thing. What's the point of living? What's the point of moving, going forward and whatever, right? So, but now knowing that Uranus is exalted there, we all of a sudden see how Uranus is actually, or Aquarius, is actually a helper to Capricorn. And it's a friend, even though, as per my last video, you'll get a different picture because I'm coming from it from a different angle. But this is all, it's and, right? It's that is correct and this is correct. Both are. So it's like building a fuller picture of the puzzle of this transition that's essentially pretty precarious. And which is why this Jinki, the gift, which is like the light, if limitation is the shadow expression of this gate, realism is the evolved, like when you work through the shadow, the next stage is called gift, and it's called realism. So what is realism in this context? And it's again a language of Capricorn, so bear that in mind, but it's how you work with realism that is Aquarian, which is again what I just said earlier about the exalted Uranus, how you work with Uranus, Aquarius, right? With Capricorn is what gets you out of Capricorn, the problematic, the shadow side of it, right? So this realism piece is about what is realism? Is to be realistic about what you have in your life, including limitations. And then instead of becoming a victim of it, which would be a shadow Capricorn, poor me, right? Or just the heaviness, just living in the heaviness and just feeling hopeless, you're working within it. You're working from inside to get yourself out. And so digging a bit deeper into this realism, it's the acceptance. That's what feeds realism. It's the acceptance, the ability to accept reality. And so what is reality? And this is the Aquarius piece. It's uncertain and unpredictable. And those are the words of Aquarius. Because we have accepted the reality. And once we accepted it, we realize that it's all those limitations, or in Capricorn terms from the previous videos, if you please watch it to kind of connect this, because it's really critical. Time-wise, we are in anyway. Those limitations, before they become a problem, they're actually structures that keep us safe, right? Because we limit. It's like, I have walls around myself in the house I live in. That's a limitation, right? But before it's a limitation, it's a good safe border, right? And then eventually becomes a limitation because now I'm just having 5 kids and the house is too small. We need to go elsewhere, or metaphorically speaking, something is just, I've outgrown it, so I need to go out. So this all outgrown it, changing, getting out, leaving the structures that, including limitations that we have built, is the Aquarius piece. So this acceptance is accepting all of that, and then and accepting that there is uncertainty, and that none of these structures essentially are going to be there forever. They're not meant to be there forever. So that's the Aquarius wisdom. The acceptance of reality is that it's forever changing. It's that this is the spiral that I talked about in the last video. It's the individuation, that we're here, to keep moving, keep growing, keep expanding, keep becoming more and more of who we are, right? That's the reality. So in Aquarius, we see the reality beyond the limits and beyond the boundaries. And it's that acceptance. So if you think about it, when we are feeling a trapped victim of a limitation in our life, it's the uncertainty of it that kills us, that just like beats us to death, which is like, well, now I had this vision, I was going to go in this direction, and I had these future plans, but now this limitation is not letting me, I can't do it. So what does that mean? Uncertainty, unknown. How am I going to get to this point? But we are instead of working with the limitation, we are seeing the limitation uncertainty. And so with giving it that title, or rather calling it that, seeing it as such, understanding it as such, we give up trying to figure out, to work with it, because it's uncertain. I don't know how to work with it. I don't know, right? So because we are myopic, we just are blinded by it, because we are feeling too small in relation to it. But if you are coming from an Aquarius end of it, Uranus exalted in that area, or just the wisdom of realism, is the acceptance that the uncertainty isn't a block. It just means that we don't know, so we just find out, we figure something out, we test something out, we experiment, we just blurt stuff out, we blurt ourselves out of it, right, or whatever. But that we don't know how and who we're going to be after we have gone through, worked with our limitations. So there is that uncertainty. And so acceptance of that uncertainty is at the root of our problem, or rather our solution, in overcoming a limitation. And it's the Aquarian principle, because Aquarius is comfortable with uncertainty and the unknown, because that's all it's about. It's all about and I'm sorry, I'm having to kind of pause more often than I usually do, because I don't want to repeat my content from last week. But I'll say this much, is because we are not wedded to the structures from the Aquarian perspective. And so in astrology, we have this clear line, Capricorn and Aquarius, and it's like poof, poof, right? And yes, when you're just thinking astrologically, watch my last week's video, that's accentuated. It's emphasized, this kind of treacherousness that I use that term. But in human design, I love how it's all like they're kept together. The end tail of Capricorn and the early Aquarius, to say that they're working together. They're a team, right? They're actually a team. They're part of the same. That this transition is a sign in itself, if you like. If we are going back to astrology speak only, like the transition is the sign, is a sign. It doesn't exist in astrology, of course, but just for this conversation here to make kind of sense more of it, it's a third sign. If there are two, Capricorn and Aquarius, there is a third sign, actually the transition. And this, in human design, it's actually called Gene Key 60 or the Gate 60, and it shows us the beauty of this teamwork. Now, I want to speak to another part of this human design gene key element, to this transitional part of our chart, this segment. And it's more human design-y in the sense that it's speaking of the centers. So I'm not, like I say, I'm going to assume you know enough about human design, but it's basically this gate forms a channel of mutation. On the opposite side of that gate is a gate 3, which I have as well. So I have the whole thing defined. So I really speak from experience. But the point there is that it's coming from root, and the 60 gate is in root, the root center of our human design chart. And then it takes us to sacral. Whether we have it defined or not, it doesn't matter. It's really, that's another beauty of human design. It's just these things are there. We have these energies and we're always working with them, even when they're not defined. My point being is that this story, this concept that I'm describing here and talking to you about, has its roots in root center. And root center is where chaos is. In that, so it's like this journey, this transition is from, it's where order is. So I got it wrong way around, checking my notes. So this movement from the gate 60 onwards, so to further into Aquarius, is a movement from order to chaos. Now this beautifully describes the astrology as well, because order is Capricorn and chaos is Aquarius. And so in terms of root, what does that feel like? So the root gives the pulse. That's the energy of root is pulsing. It comes and goes. So it has a pulse. It can be frequent pulse. It can be infrequent, meaning bigger gaps between pulses. But the periods when there is no pulse, so it feels like quiet or dead or whatever, like nothing's happening, which is why the shadow of this particular gate is depression, because that's the kind of entropy that's like, oh, well, nothing's happening, I'm lost, it's what all that stuff, right? It's a preparation time, like a germination time, for then the next function of this root center, which is leap. So the pulse happens and it leaps you into your next iteration. So this, which is why it's called channel of mutation, which it consists of another gate, which is gate 3, to complete the channel. But that's the pathway. That's the logic behind this gate, is that it leaps you. And I spoke of leap of trust in the previous video, because we are leaping from Capricorn into Aquarius, the known into the unknown. But we can't talk about leap of fate, because fate is really Capricorn. We have no fate, or rather we are leaving fate. So here we are jumping and we are trusting ourselves. And it's the also channel of individuation, the gate of individuation, the gate of individuality, individual gate, right? Sorry, I'm mixing the terms, two different schools and modalities. So the gate 60 is individual circuitry, and the channel is individual circuitry. And Aquarius is the sign of individual, and it's the sign of individuation, the completion of the process. And so it's all, in that way, it's all lining up as well. And so we are leaving, of course, we're going to have to trust ourselves, because it is a channel of individuation, of individual circuitry, because we have nothing else. And that's fine. We are born for it and with it. It's like, and when we have Pluto transiting this gate, so up until end of 2025, more or less, we have all we need to make these leaps without trusting any fate. Like, it's not a leap of fate, but it's a leap of trust, of self-trust, that we'll do fine in the unknown, and that we'll be okay with uncertainty, and that the mutation, which is essential, to change and to evolve, is actually like it's a welcoming thing that we will find our feet in straight away, because that's what it's for, right? So if you were doubting how you will be transitioning from the conservative, meaning conserving, Capricorn, into libertarian, rebel, freedom-loving, chaotic, unpredictable, unknown, wild Aquarius, and if astrology isn't good enough, like if it's not giving you enough of things to work with, or to kind of soothe your anxieties about this, then human design and Gene Keys can certainly do this, can't they? I mean, I just it's when I think of human design, astrology is a story, where human design is mechanics. It's like a manual for how to work with our energies. It's a manual. It's like an instruction, and it doesn't have to get too complicated. We can. I mean, I'm talking a story, so each of these gates have a story because they're archetypes and all that stuff. So the story always, and it's built on astrology as well. But what I mean, it's in astrology, if we're looking for permission through astrology, we are still looking for a permission, and we are getting a permission which we need to get our head around. We need to accept it. It's all mental. Where here, it's like being told that let's say you think you are driving on the road, and you now have to fly, and you're like, oh, I'm not going to fly. I have a car, it doesn't have wings, it's not a plane, right? And then someone tells you, like I just did in human design terms, that actually, no, this car has wings, you just never used it because you didn't need to. That's it. That's all it is. You don't have to, there is no belief. You just kind of, oh, okay. And you do whatever you need to do, and the wings are there, and you're flying in a car, right? That's what human design is. So this video is about giving you that permission, or that understanding that we are actually designed to transition this safely, even though it feels treacherous. And we have up until the end of 2025 to practice this journey, right? Because we will be going back and forth, even if it's just through Aquarius eventually, but it's within this gate. That's all there is. That's this transition. Capricorn or Aquarius, thematically, it's both. So yeah, make sure you do the work.